Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of Blender Shader Nodes. Today, I'll be showing you how to make this simple bubble shader using just a few simple nodes. Nothing too complex today. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, let's clear this scene and add in a new sphere. Here I'm using a UV sphere, but you could use an icosphere if you want. Let's go and add in a subdivision surface modifier, just so that it's a little bit smoother, and make sure you set the shading to smooth as well. There we go. Now that we have this, we can go and add in our material to this object. Let's add in that, and let's delete the principled BSDF node. There we go. And what we want to add in its place is a transparent node and a glossy node right here. And with these two, we want to also add in a mix shader so that we can mix between these two. So if we go and hook this up now, we can see that nothing is happening besides this shader turning black like that. And that is because we are using the Eevee render engine. If we were using cycles, you would be able to see that the transparency is working. So how do we get this to work in Eevee? Because Eevee is way faster. What we need to do is go into the settings menu in the material editor and set the blend mode from opaque to alpha blend and the shadow mode to none. Because bubbles are transparent, they don't cast that much of a shadow. Okay, but now that we have alpha blend, we can see that some errors are happening. So we can see here there's this very harsh line, and that's because Blender does not know where the back or the front of this object is. I don't know why that happens, but it does happen, and it's unfortunate. To fix that, we can turn off back face culling, just like that. This does not work in cycles, but I will show you a way to avoid this later on. So with this, let's start working on the shader. First of all, let's turn down the roughness of our glossy node so that this bubble is way more reflective, just like that. So now that we have this, we can go and move those nodes over to here. And with bubbles, they are more reflective towards the edges than they are to the center. And we can simulate that by using a Fresnel node or a layer weight node. To show you the difference, a Fresnel node looks like this, where the edges are brighter and the interior is grayer or darker. And with the layer weight node, it has Fresnel included, which is a plus, but also has this facing method, which shows that the middle is almost pure black and the outside is almost pure white. It's a linear gradient, while with Fresnel, it is more exponential. So if we were to hook up the Fresnel nodes right here, we can see that the edges are very reflective, while the middle is not. And this is more accurate to real life, but we'll be using the facing node because we could customize it a bit more stylization if we so want. So let's do that, and we could add in a color ramp so that we could say, hey, I want the edges to be a little bit brighter or the middle to be a little bit darker or more transparent. And another plus of the layer weight node, or the facing method, is that when we turn off back face culling, there aren't many errors. While if we were to use the Fresnel method, as we can see, there's quite a bit of errors happening, and this also happens in cycles. So I could show you the difference right there. Cycles, that error happens, and it has to do with backward facing faces, like the backside of the bubble. But with the facing method, it does not. I've run into that problem many times, and I thought, hey, it would be very good to put that in the tutorial. So with this, we could set this to B-spline, turn this down, so that we could go and change the bubble opacity, because sometimes you want thicker bubbles and sometimes you want thinner bubbles, just like that. Okay, so right now that's our bubble. That's everything that we need for our transparency. But bubbles usually are a bit more colorful, depending on the amount of soap that's used in the creation of the bubble. So to make that, let's add in a noise texture right here. And we want to set this to 3D, as it already is. And we want the texture coordinate to be the object input. So if we do that, we can see that we are getting all these nice colors. Let's set the detail to 0 and the scale to around 2. We're getting all these nice colors floating around. Even though there's still that error going on, I think this is only when we're viewing one of these nodes, but when it's combined with everything else, it should be fine. And we can test that right now. Let's go and hook this into the glossy node, and as we can see, that it is working pretty well. I'm not seeing any errors so far. but it's a bit muted. The colors aren't vibrant and it's not quite bright enough. And to fix that, we can use a hue saturation node right here. And we could crank up the saturation to something like 1.5. Let's do that. And the brightness we could set to 2. This might not be physically accurate, but it looks better. There we go. So now that we have this, that's basically the entire bubble, but we could go a step further if we want this to be animated. The one method I found, like some bubbles, they have kind of rings of soap floating around. I found a way to do this, is to add in another noise texture right here and set it to one-dimensional noise. We could hook up the factor into this one-dimensional noise, and as we can see, if we go into the color and turn up the scale, we are getting these rings. And these rings, if we hook this up to the shader right here and take a look at the end result, we can see that we're getting all these rings of colors right here. Now it's a bit strong. We could turn down the saturation on that, maybe turn down the scale to something like 5. But there we go. Now you get all those very nice rings, which can be animated. So if I go back into the noise texture and put in a math node in between these two, we could have the colors switch over time. So I could input hashtag frame to get the frame data or the time data, and put in divided by 100 / 100. And if we do that, we can see that this animates over time. Now, if we look at the end result once again, we can see that, there we go. The bubble is animated. Again, this might not look the best, but it's up to you. Stylistic and artistic choice. So yeah, there's one more thing we could do to take this a step further, which is what if you want these bubbles in a particle system or something like that, where you need every bubble to have a different texture or phase. Well, to do that, we could very simply add in input object info node. And if we look at the random input, we can see that each bubble here has a different value. And with this value, we can offset our noise texture so that each one looks different. So if we go into the noise texture, we can see that all these look the same. Let's look at the color because it's probably more apparent. Yeah, all of these are the same. But if we add in a vector math node and plug in the random node into that, and we could also multiply it by a bit to make it more apparent. There we go. This will make it so that every single object you add will have a different color scheme to it, or a different face of the texture. I use this all the time with many projects. Any projects that has to do with particles or instancing, I always use this method, just to vary the textures a bit. So if I were to copy this bubble, different phase, different phase, different phase. And there you go. That's that should encompass everything that you need for a bubble shader, whether you use it for particles or just one standalone bubble. So yeah, thank you for watching this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out my other videos, check out my Gumroad account. There's a ton of free and paid stuff on there. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.